peace is at the center of all those questions that you raise.
Dr.
Macharia, Kenya has gone into a new sphere during the last year of President Uhuru Kenyatta's tenure. The Democratic Republic of Congo was instituted into the East African community. Their problems became our problems, and the scramble for power and resources in the eastern part of the DRC has gone on for decades, and that's where Olive comes in terms of all these acronyms that she doesn't really understand. For example, the March 23 movement, and when you say it in French, that's how the acronym comes to M23. Speaking about the former Zaire, historically, where have the problems begun in that part of the newest kid on the block in the EAC?
Okay. So when we look at DRC, I think for me, it's a very unfortunate situation. Going back from 1960s to date, it's the country we had the first UN peacekeeping mission, and we still continue with the peacekeeping mission. So if you look at the conflict in situations, cut into three. So you have 1960s to 1990s. And after independence of this country, then you had the overthrow of the Lumumba government. And that aspect of cessation of Katanga sets the first phase of the conflict in the region. Then you come to the space after 1990 with the Rwandan genocide. And during this period created the second aspect of the conflict in DRC Congo. With the genocide, then you had a lot of people fleeing, especially refugees from Rwanda to this country. But at the same time, you had, with the Rwanda Patriotic Front advancing into Kigali, then you had the militias fleeing also to DRC Congo. So you also attract another aspect of refugee movement, but also criminals, because these were perpetrators getting into this country. And what created the complexity was the question of them being protected, especially the Interahamwe going to the country, being accused, the DRC government being accused of protecting them, but at the same time, the Rwandan government being accused of going to look for the perpetrators of genocide, and that now bring other players into the conflict. And the result was the First World War, the first Congo War that brought in any other countries into the picture. Then you have the third aspect, where now you have countries in the neighborhood making allegations that there are groups fighting in these countries and they are perpetrating conflict within their region. So Uganda has the Allied Democratic Force.
The ones that UPDF has gone into the mountains.
That is now threatening security in Uganda, and the Kampala government has accused them of carrying out terrorist attack last year.
That
so
constituted
that's
Operation
now a problem that brings Uganda into the picture. Then on the other hand, Rwanda says, no, we do also have a problem. We have people who perpetrated genocide. They still remain in this country and constantly create a problem for us. And therefore, we need to get them out with the help of this government. So it brings Rwanda into the picture. Internally, then you have the competition for the resources. So it brings in another aspect of players. Internally, local groups fighting to access the resources, but also foreign actors who are seeking to control the resources. So if you look at the space, it has both a historical question of a boundary. Where is DRC? And you have part of the territory that was moved from Rwanda to become part of DRC Congo. And then you have transfer of population during colonial era to provide labor. So part of what you're saying is a problem. It's actually a colonial of people who are brought to provide labor. But then there's a question of their citizenship, especially when genocide situation came in. So did they come or were there before? And then now you have the neighboring problems. We're saying we do have people who've gone into this country creating problem for us. And therefore, as neighbors, we need to go in, one part help the DRC government, but the other part saying we need to get the problem from ourselves that is within your country. So you have, I would look at the conflict in those three spectrums. So there's the colonial element, then there is the question of neighbors feeling there is a problem coming from one specific country, and their effort to deal with the problem, then you create another crisis in these specific countries. Rather than in yours, it goes back to DRC Congo.
It's interesting that you speak about the colonial administration, the Belgians, who literally, many have accused them of plundering the DRC. They are the ones who created some of these boundaries. Some of those groups are speakers that are across the board, and that's why some of the communities feel that why are we being listed as part of the other country, and yet this has always been our territory for as long as we can remember. And there's also an idea that maybe those areas that are having predominantly speakers that are from across the border belonged to that other side of the border. What can you talk about in terms of leading that conversation, in terms of what the Muzungus per se created as borders and what we as Africans consider? Because even here in Kenya, we have communities that are speaking the same language across the borders. We have the Maasais, we have the Luyas in Busia, we have the Somalis on the Kenya-Somalia border. They are saying it's a similar situation inside the Kivu province.
Okay. When you look at colonialism, the Berlin Conference was a product of table discussion. So you're drawing territories and marking this my space, that is your place. You're not physically there. And you find our boundaries are straight lines, yet we have rivers, we have hills, completely ignoring the dynamics in the region. So if you look at the boundaries, was specifically to how far are the resources in this region and how much can I be able to access those specific resources. And that determined how far do I draw my boundaries to allow access. So the demarcation was not determined on nation, but on a state. So when you say determined by a nation, then you have to consider who lives in that territory, how many are they, how far is their settlement, so that you don't separate them across different boundaries. But if the determination is a state, then you're looking at territorial occupation, regardless of who lives within that specific territories. And if you look at our colonial demarcation, it was created with an assumption nobody lives there. So the fact that nobody lives there, you don't, you draw the boundary disregarding any other cultural, ethnic, or affiliations. And that met the interest of the colonial forces. If you look at King of Belgium, consider this place a personal property. You can see the extent of ownership. It's not who is there, it's my property. Mm-hmm. And being my property, I determine how I use this property. I determine who belong and who does not belong. I determine who can come in and how I can use them. So the future story of belonging, your government will deal with it.